Hello, everyone. Hopefully you can hear us out there in your homes or on your flat screens, however you are watching. I am Miss Shannan Paul, Diversity and Community Relations Director here at the Twin Cities Film Fest, and I am so happy for everyone who is watching us not only live, but watching us in the replays on twincitiesfilmfest.org or on our social media channels. Very happy to have this distinguished panel of guests joining us as the Twin Cities Film Fest begins our celebration of Pride Month. So we are going to be showcasing a variety of content from our LGBTQIA plus community. And I am proud that this is going to lead us into the rest of this amazing content. So what we are doing this evening is this is an additional event in our TCFF Empower and Amplify series. And so tonight's discussion is on Pride and our filmmaker perspective. And joining me this evening, so you aren't stuck listening to me drone on and on, is a panel of LGBTQ content creators and community leaders. So I am happy to introduce, I'm going to go in the order that they are on my screen. So I'm going to start with director and filmmaker, Andrew Pachego. Hello, Andrew. How's it going over there?
Good, thank you.
And we appreciate all of the work that you've done with the Twin Cities Film Fest in the past. And if I remember correctly, you're now currently joining us from the great state of California. Is that correct, Andrew?
Yes, correct.
So thank you very much. I know that we have had a great number of your films and projects as part of the Twin Cities Film Fest in the past. So we can't wait to hear what you have to add, not only to this evening's discussion, but what we're going to be able to see next as you continue to partner with the Twin Cities Film Fest. Next, according to my screen, we have writer, director, and filmmaker Peter Groynom. Hello, Peter.
Hello. Thanks for having me here.
And you're here in the Twin Cities with me still, right, Peter?
That's right. I'm in Minneapolis.
Thank you very much. I know that we have been managing to keep busy here in the Twin Cities. I'm glad that part of the discussion this evening is going to be about the fact that it seems like all of you and a lot of our filmmaker friends are all getting back to work. So thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule for joining us this evening. Next on my screen, I have filmmaker and storyteller and documentarian Pam Colby. Hello, Pam.
Hello.
Hello.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for how all you've done as well. And I know you also have a very distinguished TV background and helped keep a lot of our channels up and running. And actually, I believe from looking through your bio, you actually were one of the truck drivers for a while. So whereas that back when you had like a giant antenna on the top of the van?
Yeah. So when I was a lot younger, because I was working on a short film today and just thinking about, oh my God, all that carrying and lifting and, you know, that was for a younger body. But anyway.
I feel you. I've been in radio for a really long time as well. I remember back in one of our station vehicles where we had that old brick of a cell phone, and we're just very impressed that we had that phone. So thanks for joining us, Pat. We appreciate you being here as well. And last, but of course not least, joining us, the executive director of FilmNorth, Mr. Andrew Peterson. Hello, additional Andrew. How's it going for you as well?
Hey, it's going well. Nice to be here with everybody.
We appreciate you joining us, everyone here this evening. So I did a little bit of homework, but I feel like I want to give all of our viewers, anyone who's watching us right now, and anyone who's watching us in the replay, an opportunity to get to know each of you a little bit better. So of the people, of the five of us that are on this flat screen right now, have any of you had the opportunity to collaborate with each other before? And so you're not surprised that you're here together on this dais?
Although I know Andrew very well because I teach at FilmNorth. So
I think we all know each other. We may not have worked together. I mean, and working together, yeah. Through a lot of you have worked with us at FilmNorth.
Perfect. So let's start with that then. So let's, Andrew, if you can give us a little bit of background on FilmNorth and the projects that you work on and how that helps our filmmaker community.
Yeah, FilmNorth is the largest filmmaker service organization in this region and one of the largest in the country. We provide a lot of services to filmmakers at every stage of their career with robust youth programs, and then also transitioning into great regular educational programs led by working professionals like Pam, and then grants and fiscal sponsorship and other things like that. it's great to be supporting filmmakers here. A lot of queer content comes through our fiscal sponsorship program. We're able to help advise and do festival strategy and really sort of help people place their work. At FilmNorth, we want our region to, the makers in our region, to accurately represent the rich diversity that we have here, and queer filmmakers, and with our Native community, two-spirit filmmakers, and there's a lot of depth and diversity here.
Thank you very much for that. So we might as well go to you next, Pam, since you do work so closely with FilmNorth. And also, I had the chance to peruse your documentary that you had come out a couple of years ago. I believe it's Not in My Lifetime. Is that right, Pam?
Mm-hmm. Yes. It was a documentary about my experience with marriage after just having lived in the queer community, pretty much my entire adult life, and in the early days, not really thinking marriage was something that I wanted, and then being in a long-term relationship and having it end just as marriage equality came. So it was a little bit of a hit and miss for me, but I also wanted to talk to other LGBTQ people and their experiences, and also some transgender people about their experience with marriage. So it was a little bit of a romp through a lot, I guess, in retrospect. I covered a lot of ground, maybe too much, but it was a great experience. And that was my most recent documentary. And I shot a short film today that I'm really excited about. It's called Perennial. And it's about an elderly lesbian woman who loses her partner to COVID. And so anyway, that went really well today.
Well, thank you for sharing that. We're excited to follow that. So congratulations. So Peter, what are you currently working on? You were saying that you are also, it's so nice to hear that we're all back up and running. What's currently keeping you busy in this new post-COVID? I don't even want to say post-COVID. We have now figured out how to leave the house again, COVID land. Right.
I know. Well, yeah, we're all still getting used to it in a lot of ways, I think. But I'm currently working on a short film that I'd written the script and was starting to have meetings with producers in February of last year. And then obviously all of that was on hold. So I'm really excited to have that short back in pre-production. And there's a script that a feature that I'm helping to write that the production company is hoping to shoot it in January in northern Minnesota. And really, yeah, I mean, the last year or so has been a time for me just to do a lot of writing and to get scripts ready for now, I guess, when things are speeding up. And I mean, it's definitely, you can just kind of feel it in the air, friends and colleagues who are excited about new projects, who are connecting with others. And, right now it feels kind of optimistic, the level of production. So we'll just keep our fingers crossed.
Right, definitely. And additional Andrew, we appreciate everything you've done. So you've done a variety of your depth of work is a variety of shorts and comedies and other things. So is there something you're really gravitating towards right now?
I mean, I've got a lot of things on a lot of irons in the fire, and a lot of them have sort of been on hold over the past year. But getting ready to start pitching a couple of things, one of which would actually ideally be shot back in Minnesota. That would be great.
Okay.
And then I've been spending most of the past year editing, because people still needed things edited, even if it was done on Zoom or done remotely.
Right.
So I'm still working on some stuff for Netflix, doing some making of things for the Queen's Gambit series that they've got out, and a couple of other things like that. But looking forward to doing some more TV and film projects this year.
And Andrew Pachego, I think when I was looking through your website, you actually did what I considered a very heartwarming, feel-good project in your community as well. Could you mind telling us a little bit about that?
Is it the Stay Proud project?
Yeah.
Yeah, so a couple years ago, after reading an op-ed in a magazine in the UK from a young queer person who had made the argument that young people don't need to learn about our community's history,
right?
Because they've got more important things to do, I set out with my friend Sam Harris to put together a series of short videos for Pride Month in 2018 that specifically focused on why we do need to care about our history. And in that process was very pleased to find that not all young people feel that way. A lot of them really do understand the history and the importance of knowing where we came from, and that's the only way to know where we're going. So there are a bunch of those that are still out there, and I'm very proud of those. A lot of really good people involved.
Mm-hmm. And Pam, when you talk about your documentary that you did as well, where we do cover the history of what goes on in this community, like even if we go through the how we have evolved and changed the initialisms for this community and what languages we use, how do you go, here's what I want to focus on for now, or what lens do I want to showcase? And as we're continuing to tell this story.
I think that for me, I've just always been drawn to telling stories that are close to my life. So one of the things that I did, not too recently, but one of my first short films was about a lesbian bar that was burned down in a hate crime. And it was told to me by a friend who was a lot older than me. She's 87 right now. When we shot it, she was about only 78 or something like that. But she remembered, and it was her partner's bar. And so it was a major story, and nobody had ever heard it before. It was the first lesbian bar in the Midwest. From Chicago to LA, it was the only lesbian bar. And it was in '74. So we reenacted that situation. And so I'm always looking for stories that are true and close to home. That's, I would say, my MO.
Mm-hmm. And Andrew Peterson, you mentioned that specifically at FilmNorth, you do try and look for a variety of projects to work on and to try and make sure that diverse filmmakers and diverse storytellers have an opportunity. Do you ever find that maybe the stories might exist, but the community doesn't know that there's a resource to help them tell the story?
Yeah, that happens a lot. I mean, and it's not just peculiar to us. I think it's everywhere. Filmmakers are used to, and I think you guys can all agree, are used to sort of working alone, somewhat in isolation, whether you're writing a script at your computer, you're pulling together your teams to make the films, you're editing in isolation. A lot of times we feel like we have to do this alone, but there are places out there to help. It's, we're here to remove barriers. We're here to help however we can. One thing that I enjoy mostly is just, I also program the Provincetown Film Festival on Cape Cod. It opens in 2 weeks, and I advise a lot of projects, and I work with Sundance, and it's not me vomiting out things that I do. It's just like I'm a resource for you.
Right.
Like if you want to talk about getting into these festivals, let's talk at the idea stage. Let's talk. I often talk when people make a documentary. When we watch a documentary that's on, say, the History Channel or on HBO or on Independent Lens, it might pitch all the same way, but they were made 3 different ways.
Right.
It's just like what's the right platform for your film, and then when you figure that out, what's the right way to film it? It's really about, but Sundance, isn't the be all and end all. That isn't, there are a lot of different ways to define success in a career. And I remember meeting with a career filmmaker that was like, just wanted to make a film that worked, that played in women's shelters. And it's sort of like the saying, why isn't this getting into festivals? It's like, did you make it to get into festivals? You're a success. You did this. You did exactly what you set out to do. You made a film, you made a difference. It's playing to the audience you wanted it to play to. So, but these are just things that I dove into. Sorry, I fell in a rabbit hole. I really like talking to filmmakers in detail about their work. What defines success in their career? How do they get there?
Andrew, don't worry. We're going to go down a lot of rabbit holes. That's pretty much what we do on the Empower and Amplify series. That's why they let me host it. I am the queen of rabbit holes. But I mean, speaking of those rabbit holes, and I think that that's a good point. And we'll put this out to the whole group. And Peter, you mentioned you're writing a lot of things. You're working on these things. How do you weed through there are so many stories in my head. I'm going to focus on this one right now. And this is the time for this story. And maybe it's not the time for another story. How do you guys balance all of that?
Well, you have really, I think, just, I guess, self-awareness. And, it's like the 10,000 hours thing where if you've just practiced writing in this instance, And, I have a file where I've got all my ideas for something. I've got my file for characters. I've got my file for jokes. And then the project will just gain momentum automatically, I think. And it'll kind of tell you when it's ready to be written and ready to like start sharing with other people, and start meeting with getting coffee with people to see who can help produce it and all, making those connections. Like the project and the idea kind of has its own agenda after a certain point, which is, one of the really fun things about this work, I think.
One of the things I always think is interesting when you speak with people who are in our industry, and we're speaking with filmmakers and actors and writers and content creators in general, is even when we started, there were so many things that I could read in your bio and so many things that make you the human being that you are. Since you are also part of the LGBTQIA community, do you feel pressure to focus on those projects, or do you feel that people go, you should focus on these projects for the prevailing culture and worry about those other ones, they're an indulgence? Does that come up very often in your work?
I don't personally get that. I think that there, as far as I'm concerned, there are a lot of projects that have maybe, some queer element to them. And of course that's appealing, but I don't ever get the sense that it's sort of a directive that one has to have a particular element or not. So it's really about what's the right story, and, are you the right person to tell it? And how do you continue to create art that inspires people, really?
I appreciate everybody's nodding like, nope, we do what we want. I appreciate that though, because the reason I bring that question up is I feel like that happens in, I have that conversation with people where, especially with the world that we're living in now, that there are so many, we'll just say hot seat topics out there, that if you choose to create content on not that specific topic, then sometimes people, at least in my experience, have a tendency to kind of look at you like, well, how do you even have the bandwidth to talk about anything else? And, Andrew Pachego, I know that you also use a lot of humor, all of you do, in different works. So how do you go, here's the right way to tell this story, or here's the way I'm going to, as you mentioned it, Andrew Peterson, here's the way that we are going to focus on this film because of what your audience is. So how do you help just take those lenses and go, this is the right lens for today?
Well, it's one thing I bring up is I'm a maker as well. I produce and direct, and not everything's queer, but I think everything's done through a queer eye. I can't turn that off. And, and I love that when we program Provincetown, for instance, we're not an LGBTQ festival, but our audience is majority. And we're a rich community with a lot of different interests and topics that are of importance to us, and things that we want to advocate. And when we lift up those stories, we're telling them through our lens. As queer people, and I think we can relate to a lot of other communities, at least a little bit,
right?
In just this idea of, I remember when I was younger, and maybe I can pass this straight on a film set, and I was, being around a bunch of other white guys with beards, and Peter, I'm trying to get there, and they start saying homophobic things, and I'm like sort of hiding. It's like I think we've all had these moments, and where we can identify with what it's like to feel othered. And I think, when I say we look at things through a queer eye or a queer lens, that's part of it. Is that we can empathize, I think, with other topics. But I'm just really excited when people do explore the things that are just important to them and come out of their own life experience.
I think there's also something to be said about not just queer stories, but surrounding yourself with people, cast and crew, who are from various diverse backgrounds, because the more you can be inclusive and have people of differing viewpoints and lived experiences, the more likely that you're going to tell a story that resonates with a lot more than just one specific narrow audience. Not that there's anything wrong with creating something for a very specific niche audience. That's fantastic too. But I think it's important to make sure that you're not excluding anybody, and that's not just in the storytelling, but in how you crew up and cast your projects.
Well, I was recently speaking to a filmmaker who's based in Florida, and she was telling me about how they're working on a documentary about the shooting at Pulse nightclub. And what they were really saying is that it was a lot of humanizing. It wasn't about, well, these people happen to be, you know, gay or how they identified. It was about, this is what happened in a human experience. And, you know, does that really lean into a lot of what we've said just recently, where you go, if you can just have that diversity, if you can have a variety of lenses, then you tell stories that focus on our commonalities?
I would say so. And I definitely feel that, I mean, I think, you know, the more diversity in the storytelling and the production, the better. And it's just better for everybody. And it also, you know, telling stories of these communities, it's a great tool to present an authentic, interesting character, you know, just because so many of these perspectives have not been explored in especially in mainstream film or even indie to a degree, having those like extra layers to a character, like how they identify, what communities they belong to. It's really a tool to like get to authenticity and make characters more compelling, I think, and make it feel like a modern story.
Right.
You know, I think for viewers, nobody wants to go to see a movie that they think they've seen hundreds of times already. They want to go to a movie to be like intrigued and surprised and vested in what these people are going through on screen. And, you know, it's just another tool to help create that, I think.
And those commonalities are just so important. I was going to say, there are times where we make movies for our communities.
Right.
But, you know, as makers, I think we often, we strive to get our stories out and not just speak in a vacuum or speak to ourselves or speak to the converted. So when we find those commonalities, when you mentioned Pulse, it's like, it's a sad commonality. There are many other places that weren't queer that suffered a similar sort of, you know, situation and reality. And it's like, you know, if you were to make a film about Pulse, it should reach out to those communities as well, and you know, and connect us all.
When you're having, when you are in your creator mind, and you've all talked a little bit about the lens and those kind of stories, when you get to the subject matter of just representation, is that something that you think that you are more attuned to than you may have been, we'll even say 20, 30 years ago? Do you think that our creators now are better at that and having those authentic characters from a variety of different perspectives? I
think there's a lot more awareness to it now, and that's a good thing. I mean, I'm speaking for myself. I don't know how the rest of the panel feels. Like, yeah, my eyes have been opened to a lot in the past 5, 10 years, year even. You know, in terms of how do you tell stories? Whose story is it to tell? And if it's not your story to tell, but it's still something that you believe in, how do you help the people whose story it is to tell find success and find an audience in that? So, I mean, you know, 80% of the people on this video right now are white, presumably cisgender people. And, you know, we probably had our experiences and shared experiences, but that's a tiny fraction of what, you know, the world is out there. So I think it's important to make sure we make space for other people and empower people who are not of our upbringing and perspective to
definitely.
And I think in our community, things have changed so much around, for me, when I came out in the early 80s, I identified as a butch lesbian. And now I'm clearly on the gender spectrum. And so I see young ones who are much more claiming their gender identity than I ever have. And I think it's really empowering. There's just some ways that the young kind of power through that some of us who have broken other walls are kind of exhausted by.
Fair enough.
But you know, it's an exciting time to watch the community because we're really identifying with the spectrum in a much different way than when I first came out.
I'm fascinated by this personally because, you know, we work with a lot of young filmmakers, and, you know, I came out, you know, after college, and, you know, and then we saw that people became more and more comfortable coming out younger, and then even younger, and now transitioning younger. And it's a very different world than it was in the early 90s when I produced the first film that I did that was a queer film that played, you know, Frameline and Strand Releasing put out, and we felt the weight. You know, it was like we were telling our stories for the first time.
Right.
You know, when Todd Haynes and Rose Trochet and Cheryl Dunye started to make work, it was revolutionary, and and everything was under a microscope. There's an arc to every community, you know, underrepresented communities, you know, storytelling arc. You know, we're far enough out where we can kind of see this. You know, where we can get to a place where Ang Lee makes Brokeback Mountain, and we're okay with it. You know, there are other communities that are just getting the cameras in their hands for the first time right now. And you know, but I was just saying to your original question, it's like there was a time in my life I felt the weight greatly. I don't feel it so much anymore. Okay. I don't feel that what I make represents our entire community to the entire country.
Right. So you don't feel like this is your one shot and you'll never have a chance to tell these stories again if we don't get it right.
I can screw up now. Before I felt like we couldn't screw up.
Fair enough.
You know, I remember talking. There was I worked with Parker Posey once, and she was like, "I loved it when we shot on film. It was like you got 400 feet, you got one take, you got to do it exactly perfectly. You got one shot." She said, "I love that pressure. I hate digital. Now it's as many takes as we want." And it's similar. You know, we when we were making, it was called World in Time, and Eric Miller directed it. When we were making that film, we felt the weight every day. And we were shooting on film, we were making something, we were, you know, it's like, you know, and we felt the weight of the community because nothing was really out there.
So we've talked about how we got here. Do you guys have an idea of where you would like, and we don't have to fortune tell very far into the future. Let's just start with 5 years. Where would you like us to be in the next 5 years? Is there anything that you feel that we're on the cusp of that we could get there in that amount of time, or you'd like to see us get there?
I'd like to see, you know, more. It's interesting. So for so many years, the pendulum was way over here in terms of who was allowed to make films and tell stories. And I think what we've seen over the past several years is that it's swung in many ways. Like, I don't know if it's fully on the other side, but there are a lot more opportunities for people who didn't have them before.
Right.
And I think when that initially happened, the support mechanisms weren't in place to make sure that people who hadn't had opportunities before were given the structure to succeed. And we're starting to see a lot more of that. So we're seeing a lot more programs that give people a voice or give them the skills to be able to tell their stories. And I think that, you know, you look at what's going on politically in the world today, especially in this country, and how the anti-trans legislation that is happening.
Right.
And I'm hoping that 5 years from now, we're hearing more voices from people who are underrepresented, even within our own community, because when you get to know someone, whether it's a personal conversation or you watch a film or see somebody on television, it opens up your perspective and the blinders come off and you start to see other people with a shared humanity. And so my hope is that in 5 years, we're hearing more stories from more people who don't look and sound like us.
Right. And the rest of our panel guests, what do you see? What would you like to see in the next 5 years?
Well, I would argue, yeah, I would just echo what Andrew just said. Definitely more representation and more communities, you know, through whatever opportunities hopefully will exist in 5 years, that people will have the support and the capability to tell their own stories. I think that's, you know, the more voices is always a good thing. I'm also really interested in like genres kind of coming together, like telling multiple genres with queer people at the forefront of those narratives. for my own work, I'm very interested in science fiction, as well as drama and comedy. But science fiction, I think, is a really interesting genre in that, like, in a way, it tries to tell like the human story, through allegory or metaphor. And for so long, there have not been queer voices at the center of those narratives.
Right.
And the thing I like to say is, like, why is it that in these stories that claim to tell the universal human experience, you never see a queer person in the center of those stories? And like, it's as if the narrative is saying that, like, queer people's lives cannot have universal meaning for others, which I would love to see that change in 5 years.
I love it. If anyone is watching in the chat, before we go to additional Peter and Pam, feel free to put your question or your comment in the chat, and we'll have a chance for our panelists to discuss that as well. All right, Peter, Pam, Andrew and Pam, who would you like to, who wants to go next on what you see in the next 5 years?
Pam, you want to take a shot?
I have been working in a junior high, being the videographer the last year, and I feel pretty excited about those. It's a diverse group of kids, and I'm really excited about how those kids see the world. I think that as hard as things have been in Minnesota, they have really big imaginations. It's been hard watching them go through COVID, but I definitely see that as the future, that these who is going to be leading us. And I also just have to say, as somebody, I feel like I keep bringing it up, as an aging person, I want to see more aging people on the screen. My short film I shot today was an older woman, and I love older faces, and I feel like we have so much discrimination about age. So I think that's my new thing, is like, I'm putting old people on the screen.
We really do. That's a fantastic point, because I share your sort of your excitement about the next generation, the youth that we're seeing coming through. But we are a youth obsessed. On the flip side of that, we're a youth obsessed culture. And we empower people with very little experience and to tell stories. That's great, but we can't forget the other end. It really bothers me. There's a new scholarship named after Lynn Shelton, a filmmaker who recently passed away. For anybody over, she made her first film when she was 39. That's like a dinosaur in Hollywood, and it's really upsetting. It's like, but the point is like, she's living her life. She has economic barriers. She has a family to raise. She doesn't have time to make movies. Making art is a privilege, and it's also, but it's not available to everybody. So there's a lot to be said about that, and I think that as our population ages, we're going to want those stories, and they're there. But so I would love that you did that, Pam. But the things that I love is like there are other platforms, specials, something I like on Netflix. Not every episode doesn't have to be the same length, and it's following a community we haven't seen before. The lead has cerebral palsy. It's sort of like and following. I think this is something that we've been seeing happen more and more. Pariah did this within the young queer people of color, lesbian culture within Brooklyn. It's sort of like, let me see a new story, because I've seen a lot of these other ones. The other thing, though, I have to say that I want to see in 5 years is just a little bit more of an arc toward where we want to go. When we look at the Cannes Film Festival lineup, is wonderful. It was announced a few days ago. It's still really crappy with women. And it's sort of like, we see strides, and it's one step forward, 2 steps back. And it's sort of like, we may feel like we made it, and there may be a lot of people out there, and this panel, it's great. We're making stuff, and we're saying there's the next generation coming up. We never stop fighting for representation, because it can be taken away in a heartbeat.
And I do agree with you that quite often you get one success, and then the prevailing culture will be like, you had one, you're good. And so everything else that you're working on, it doesn't matter. And especially when we're talking about all of this intersectionality, it seems like you can't have multiple winners. So if we get a champion, or we get to champion something in the queer community, then the BIPOC community has to sit down, or you can't have a feminist cause do well and all these other things at the same time. So that's the other reason why I appreciate the fact that we have such a diverse community of filmmakers that are going, no, it should be okay for me to have an older person that's going a little gray, or specifically an older woman, because we seem to be okay with older males, but we can't, we don't want to tell the story of older women. So the fact that there are so many different touch points that we're all focusing on, I applaud all of you for continuing to focus on the things, because it's a lot of work. So thank you for doing the work, all of you. And speaking of work, so how's the best way for us to support each of you? We can go in turn again. So if we want to start with Andrew Pachego, if you want to let us know how we can follow you. Do you want us to follow you on your socials, support you, go to your website? What's the best way for us to support your work?
Sure. I mean, my website is currently in the process. It's almost done being redesigned, so it's not fully there right now, but it's mostly there. ninjagoldfish.com.
I love that, by the way. Just
thank you. And that's my, my socials aren't really super public. I kind of took them all private a couple of years ago, just because it was stressful and I don't care about likes and things like that. But if you follow my my website, or if you want to chat about anything, you can reach out to me there too.
Perfect. Peter, your turn.
Yeah, my website is petergroenham.com, just like it's spelled. What? No, spelled right.
There we go.
And yeah, I'm on Instagram at pgroenham. And like everybody else, I'm on IMDb if people want to look at some of my work. And yeah, I'm relatively active on Instagram, and I certainly try to keep the website updated. So.
Wonderful. Pam, your turn.
PamColby.com, and also I'm a big Facebooker. No surprise, my generation. And it's all public, and I do Instagram as well.
Perfect.
And that's Pam Colby as well.
Gotcha. And Mr. Peterson, your turn.
Yeah, good luck with my name standing out in the crowd. It's like, it's when I go to the store, I give my last name, then my first name, then I have to give my street, then I usually have to give my address. There was a time in my life I had to give my address because there was another Andrew Peterson on my street in my.
Oh no!
Anyway, but Andrew, when you Google Andrew Peterson, you get a Christian rock artist, which is not my alter ego. It is FilmNorth is the best way to look me up and find me, and Provincetown Film Festival.
And I can't even lie, I did specifically, because I did all of the promos for this panel, I did specifically put Andrew Peterson, Executive Director of FilmNorth, because of that. So thank you for acknowledging that. It's not that we don't think you're special. There's just you're not as specifically named as some of our other panelists. That's
look, it's like I have a twin brother. My other thing, I have a twin brother. His name is Tim, and it's like in our high school yearbook there were like 18 Petersons between him and me. So like it's like.
Well, we appreciate all of you being part of the conversation this evening. For everyone who's watching us in the replay, or you watch it this evening, we please also encourage you to like, follow, and subscribe to our Twin Cities Film Fest channels and our social media channels. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. And you can always stay connected with the Twin Cities Film Fest by joining our mailing list. And you can, of course, become a member, which we would encourage all of you to do by going to our website, www.twincitiesfilmfest.org. Thank you to all of you. We appreciate all of the wonderful work that you've shared with us in the Twin Cities Film Fest over the years. And we are so sure that with the prolific amount of content each of you are creating, that we will have the opportunity to have you at a future film fest as well. So thank you guys. We appreciate everybody that joined us, and we will check in with everybody again very, very soon.